We are live.
We're live, Senate Appropriations, January 23rd. We're going through Budget Adjustment Act. I think we're on maybe our last one, which is the Vermont Veterans Home. So thanks for joining us online. I'll let you introduce yourself for the record, and then let us know what your one request is in the VA.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Melissa Jackson. I am the CEO of the Vermont Veterans Home. I am here with Stephen McClafferty, our finance director, and Gary DeGasta, president of the board of trustees for the Vermont Veterans Home. So actually, we do not have an actual request for an increase in funding. It's more just to clarify some budget line adjustments. So our Medicaid settlement was actually larger than we anticipated by $963,267. So that has resulted, along with our increase in our rehab revenue increase of $71,000, an increase in our total special funds of $1,034,567. So we are happy to report we need less general funds. So we're reporting that we're reducing the general fund line by that $1,034,567, and increasing the special fund line.
Where is it in the sheet? Is it on that sheet?
B342.
B342. And then you also have some slide. Well, I guess there's one slide that does the math for us.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's good news.
Mm-hmm.
And what were those? Did you say that? Maybe I didn't hear the special funds, which is the settlement funds?
It was the settlement dollars and an increase in our revenue related to physical, occupational, and speech therapy, which are Medicare dollars.
Okay. Well, great. Anything else you want to update us on what's happening at the Veterans Home?
Sure. I want to share that it's been another incredible banner year here at the Vermont Veterans Home. The staff has received the Silver National Quality Award from the American Healthcare Association. We are the only nursing home in the state of Vermont to receive this award. We also received the U.S. News and World Report Best in Class Nursing Home for Long-Term and Short-Term Care. Again, the only nursing home in the state of Vermont to receive both of those. And we were just recently recognized by Google as one of the top 10 nursing homes in the state of Vermont. And we're especially proud of that last award because that is based solely on reviews provided by our customers. We don't apply for that award. So that is directly done by feedback on from our customers. And we just passed a VOSHA inspection without any deficiencies. So the team down here is providing high quality care in a really safe environment. And I'm really proud of this team and everything that they do. So the state of Vermont's very fortunate to have probably the best state veterans home in the country.
Yeah, no, you definitely do great work down there. And how are you doing as far as staffing and the use of visiting nurses and things like that?
So we are making progress in that department. In July, we hired a new director of nursing, Sarah Sigsbury. And since her arrival, she has hired 16 members to our nursing department. That has been her #1 priority. And we have had 3 LNA classes. One is graduating next week with 8 LNAs. And then the other two classes, we have had 4 LNAs start from that. So we are making progress. Still have, do you remember the number, Stephen? I don't have it off the top of my head. I think we still have about 25 agency staff members here, but we are slowly whittling that down.
And out of a total, what's your total nursing staff? 25 out of how many?
Out of, hold on, I have that on the slide over here. Give me just a minute.
It could be a round number, like I don't need to use big head.
I think it's out of, it's 70. We just talked about this yesterday. You think I would have remembered? I think it's out of like 65 or something, right, Steve? Does that sound right? That number's in my head for some reason, but that could be our total open positions.
I think open positions were like 46,
Right.
48 as of the 8th.
I don't have the current number, the current total number of nursing positions right in front of me. I can email that to you.
Yeah, when you get a chance, that'd be interesting to see. And you're full as far as patients, I assume, as always.
So actually, no. We still have the 30 beds offline. We were very close to being full. And we literally had 4 deaths in 48 hours last week. Yeah, so it ebbs and flows. We still have a long waiting list. We had an admission yesterday. We have one next admission next week, and then another the following week. So we are moving through our long waiting list and working to refill the beds. So
As of January 8th, this is Steve McClafferty, the finance director. As of January 8th, we had 44 open clinical positions, 9 registered nurses, 5 licensed practical nurses, and 30 licensed nursing assistants.
Those are the openings, or those were that's the opening plus the staff. Those are the staff positions.
those are the open positions. We'll get you the total staff numbers.
Yeah. Right, well, so is that why if you had more staff, you'd be able to have more bed?
Well, we have the 1 unit offline, partly because of staffing and partly due to the fact that there are several rooms that cannot be used due to some plumbing issues. We do have the design work done to have that unit torn down and rebuilt. So now it's a question of working with the VA and the state of Vermont to make funding determinations to have that unit rebuilt.
And was there some other capital project that you guys did? Or maybe I'm thinking of another the veteran gardens or something?
So there's the Veteran Farming Initiative where the Board of Trustees leased land to the Bennington Conservation Corps, and they are leading a project to offer a co-op farming program for veterans who have just gotten out of the service. So we're offering the land, they're running that project.
Right, but it's at your location, it's like behind your field.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions for the veteran home? All right, well, thank you for your care you provide, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll see you when the budget comes around.
Okay, thank you.
All right, have a good day.
Bye.
All right, Jill, do you want to talk to us about you?
Okay.
Nobody called up and yelled at you. Wow.
Thank you for coming. I don't think we've had you in this
No.
meeting before. Do you know people around there? We could do a quick round of videos.
Sure, that'd be great. So, in Watson.
All North Franklin County and the town of Ellenburg and Randolph County.
Rich Wesson, in Loyal County and Fletcher.
And you're perfect.
Jenny Lyons, Chittenden Southeast.
Pat Brennan, Grand County. Separate Alberta.
He took it. Yeah.
Good afternoon. So my name is Jill Remick. I'm the Director of the Division of Property Valuation and Review at the Tax Department. I was asked to sort of shoehorn in with a presentation about the various reports you're expecting. So we do our PVR, our Property Valuation Review Annual Report. It is not out yet. We are putting very finishing touches on it. That will be out and to you folks next week. I did, as I was leaving my office, I do have a bunch of copies of last year, so it's all
Yeah.
very much the same information except for
Yeah,
we have
we got last year.
great. So
It's
it'll,
based on the prior year grant.
yes. So essentially, this is the culmination of everything that happens in the year prior. As you folks might be aware, a huge role that property valuation review plays, working with municipalities to do everything related to administering the statewide education property tax. The last half of the year is we're doing what we call the equalization study. So we do this sales verification study, a huge amount of sort of data review with each municipality, and that's what actually culminates in the CLA, the common level of appraisal, and the CODs, the coefficient of dispersion. So then those pieces lead into tax rate setting. So that's why this report sort of is due to folks all in January. And it has all the grant list information. There are a lot of also a significant amount of supplemental data that comes out with this report. Property tax credits by town, homestead information by town, current use information by town. So the report that we put together, and I'm not sure how in-depth you folks want me to go. I didn't mean to pour it in on joint.
Well, we thought you could.
Sure, no, I appreciate that. So this report is helpful. It sort of has the one-stop shop of all the different components that our division does. So we have, like I mentioned, we do the equalization study. We also have information there about different grand list categories, statewide and by town. And then the education grand list values for each of those categories, statewide and by town. We have municipal tax rate information in here. Personal property value, and then, like I mentioned, we have sort of longitudinal information about the statewide CLA, and then CLAs by year.
Yeah, so there's one town that hasn't had a reappraisal since 2005, so 20 years.
Right.
And they're not required to do it. They just, unless they get under the CLA, gets a certain mark, then they're.
As of, I can't remember which of the two acts in the last 2 years, there is now a 6-year reappraisal cycle in effect. So that, prior to, Act 68 of 2024, I think is, right. So we would do the equalization study, and based on the results of that study, we would issue a reappraisal order, basically saying, hey, Town X, you are now required to reappraise because your CLA or COD have gone beyond the bounds.
Do you remember what the bounds are? Is it?
It changed a few times. It was like, so if the CLA went above or below 80% and 120%, I think then it got moved to 85 and 115. But basically saying the grand list values that you have on your grand list based on our analysis are too far removed from fair market value, and therefore you need to reappraise.
So if your town doesn't have a lot of sales, or just the value is holding steady, then you don't have to give the rate.
Yeah, and even ones with really small sales, they might need to look at other sales that are comparable. I mean, even the very small towns do get a CLA every year,
Right.
but there's certainly
one
more.
that hasn't done one in 20 years, probably just doesn't have much sales, or maybe just held steady.
Yeah, there's a few reasons. I think in a large part, it's really hard to find reappraisal firms to do the work actually.
Yeah.
And
Well-
the firms will argue that it costs more in some cases to do the smaller towns, and especially the longer time between reappraisal,
Right.
the more the data is going to need cleaning up. So that's another reason why the 6-year cycle is supposed to kind of help us get on a more regular cycle and get everyone on a level playing field.
And is that a 6-year cycle that requires within 6 years, or what are you saying?
Right, so
That's
every 6 years have a reappraised grant.
every time.
Yeah.
Regardless of their sales.
Right,
But there was something in that 73 that created reappraisal kind of districts.
right.
And so each one of those is gonna get a reappraisal. that we're gonna do, the state's gonna do that, or is-
No, so that's one possibility. That hasn't happened yet. We're right sort of in the transition. We actually are coming next week to do we have a report due to the House Ways and Means about the reappraisal district structure. But yeah, so we're in a state of transition from the orders that we had already ordered, and some of those towns have been under order year after year after year after year, and they may not be able to find anybody.
And
Or they might,
you have the discretion on, if you have some discretion around that, because if the town is gone out and look for an appraisal company and they can't get to anybody and it's gonna take 4 years to get it. The tax department has been lenient with tax.
that's right. Right, so the theory is if we all get on a regular cycle, we have you can plan ahead for that, the firms can plan ahead. But we realized pretty quickly, especially over the summer, we had a stakeholder working group on this with municipalities and firms. That we're coming back around to there's sort of a supply and demand capacity. We don't have enough assessors to do the work, either on the municipal level for the year by year grand list and also for these firms to do reappraisals on a regular basis. So our report that we're presenting next week is a lot more focused on how to build up that sort of career path and that pipeline of people. Because we've created the 6-year cycle, we've created the regional assessment districts by county, but there's no bodies to fill that work. So that's sort of, we realized we need that kind of foundation before we can build.
better what?
Is that why the per parcel amount is up so much?
Which per parcel amount?
You do the payment to the towns based upon per person.
Yes.
Most communities save that money up over time
Right,
to be able to do the appraisals you want.
right.
The proposal from the governor's budget is becoming that that per parcel amount be taken out of the pilot fund at 3.4 million. In your report from last year, it was 2.8.
Yeah.
To pay the per parcel amount, so you're up 600,000, and you haven't really, unless they changed it because of the 6-year cycle. That might answer why it's up. I'm just trying to understand
Yeah, thank
why
you.
that is up 600,000.
I see. So up in the proposed budget, I apologize. Right, so because I was going to say for many years, it's been flat. It's a statutorily determined number. I don't think it'll
Right.
change.
And
since
it's based on
2005.
parcels, and the number of parcels doesn't move all that.
Exactly. So for a very long time, we've been sending out this per parcel payment to towns, per parcel meaning literally how many parcels. So as you can imagine, some of the smaller towns aren't getting very much
Right.
of that. But the idea being that they are set aside for reappraisal, but also it was reappraisal and grand list maintenance. So it's been really hard for us to sort of extract what the true cost of the reappraisal is versus the grand list maintenance, which is all the work that happens every year. Equalization study, homestead, transfers, things like that. So, great. So in the proposal, we not only tried to bring it up to today's dollars, because that it was $8.50 per parcel, and then $1 per parcel for the equalization study had not changed in a long time. So just based on inflation alone, it actually should be closer to 12. And then also trying to separate using it for the grand list versus using it for reappraisal. And then the other component is that per parcel payment has just gone out year after year after year after year. And I think the goal was when Act 60 and Act 68 first passed is that the state and the town kind of had equal skin in the game for this reappraisal happening. So the idea was that the state would pay that amount every year. This town would set it aside so that between their municipal budget and the money they'd gotten from the state, they'd have enough money to pay costs for reappraisal. But for some, it had gone 10, 15 years. We're continuing to send that per parcel payment out. So part of the new proposal is like, okay, if we're going to a 6-year structure, we need to increase that to today's dollars. We need to have it be genuinely reflective of what it costs to be a reappraisal. But then after the 6-year cycle, that's your pot of money you're getting from the state. We won't just continue to send it out year after year. So it is a significant change.
The town will still do the contract, or will
At
there be a
this
separate
point-
contract?
Right, so part of our report is sort of, we were asked to consider the state
Different
taking
model.
over for these regional assessment districts, which are currently by county, except for Franklin and Grand Isle, and then Essex and Orleans, for each one to be one, just based on parcel count. That theoretically, that could be a new entity that shared reappraisal contracts. Again, we're finding until we get some of these sort of more foundational, maybe less exciting pieces done, like establishing a certification program or some sort of career path for folks. And removing any barriers for towns to work across boundaries already, then we can't just simply impose this stamp and say it shall be done. Like, there's not a board right now that could sign a contract on behalf of a regional assessment district.
Right.
Those sort of things have to get worked out.
Right.
So for the moment, we are trying to be more proactive in getting attention on those smaller towns that are doing their due diligence. They're putting out requests for proposals and they're not hearing anything, and they really, really need their reappraisal done. Which you can see by some of the CLAs, and you'll see that again, the
Yeah.
report coming out next. I mean, there's some towns with strikingly low common level appraisals.
Yeah,
They really do, and it really does impact their tax rates.
right, and it freaks people out, like in my
Yes,
school district, one town is that's getting 8%, and next town is getting 24%.
yes,
And people, they don't, they need to talk to them about the CLA, and their eyes glaze over, and they're like,
right,
just fix it. Like,
right, right.
Well,
Yeah.
and the part of the other reason we asked that is the shift in the governor's budget is to the pilot fund. And I would suspect the league hasn't caught up with this yet, but
we'll hear from them, I'm sure.
I'm sure. And so I think it's helpful to know exactly where the money's going and why there's an increase there. On that was helpful.
Good, thank you. Right, and just for folks' edification, on page 36 and 37, you sort of outline those per parcel payments and where they come from. So right now, the majority come from the general fund. So that the reappraisal currently comes out of the general fund.
Right, right.
So that's, I could go on about just reappraisal alone for a long time if you know, but there is no, currently this, basically the way that it works is the state approves a list of firms that can do the reappraisals. The towns are still individually contracting for those. And regardless of sort of what happens in the transition, if we can find ways to get towns to work together, if we can find ways that we need to target support for those smaller towns, right? So for example, could PBR hold a contract? And then if a town by a certain period of time says, I still can't find anybody, then we can say, hey firm, we're gonna pay to go to this town. Because we can't continue to have CLAs in like the 40% level. So we're in a bit of a transition right now, but I think it's moving in the right direction. It's going to take a long time. We're already, I mean, just for an example of how in demand the firms are and how behind we are in that sense. We are now approving contracts for towns that are happening for reappraisals in 2031. That's the line. They're getting in line. And that's some of the soonest. So the firms need people. They would love to find more people who are interested and qualified. So we're trying to get the word out.
Well, I've heard from some constituents that wanted to get into it, but I think there's an apprenticeship part. You had to work with somebody that wasn't an appraiser, but then the appraisers didn't have any apprentices. And the wannabe apprentices thought it was just they were purposefully guarding the profession. And so this is something I assume you're recommendations to fix that problem.
Yeah, and we've had great conversations lately with Community College of Vermont and the Department of Labor. We do have a certification program that PBR, our little team, does host that is now required for listers and assessors to take. They have time to take all those courses. So that does not require apprenticeship, but if you're going to become a reappraisal firm, right, the current administrative rules do require like an apprenticeship. So we're also trying to see, is there enough appetite, need, reason to have it be another license like a real estate appraiser is with Secretary of State's office, for example. But it's true that finding an apprentice and then, training your replacement can be challenging.
Or they feel it as they're training their competition.
Competition, yes. Yeah. Sorry.
The other problem comes in that you have some specialty areas. So, we for years had problems with who's going to appraise a dam. And we've gone back and forth with all of that. In my community, it's very different appraising timeshare units. In a resort community, there is a regular home. And there are specialty firms that do that. So, and it held us up for an appraisal was that.
Yeah.
We couldn't find that because there were so few.
Yeah. And we do now, thanks to the legislature, have the CALIF program, which is our commercial assistance and litigation, commercial appraisal litigation assistance program. Very new. I think this is our second full year in business, but basically that PBR sort of recruits a stable of those specialized contractors. And can actually help towns with those appraisals, if they meet certain qualifications. So we have, what we're finding, we're having to do a lot of those more unique properties is actually closed colleges, which is kind of, it's like an interesting, we've sort of had a rash of small
Unfortunately, we have
colleges.
several.
Yeah, but also like ski areas, wind farms, you know, all those kind of unique, high value commercial properties that are significant value for that municipality's brand list, and it's very niche, right?
Yeah.
Methane digesters, things
Right.
like that. So we do now have a program that we're standing up that some towns are taking advantage of, and they qualify to help with that, because that can also be costly.
We assume that methane digesters would be in current use under a farm building.
Maybe some. There's a couple now. They used to be my example of unique, and now they're not as unique.
The state was encouraging them for a while, so we were building. So one of the other things that we talked about this report was around current use.
Yeah.
I think it was mentioned like this is where you go to get information on current use. So it looks like that pages
That's
20 through 26.
And I presume the report coming next week is gonna have very similar page number and look and feel. You know, we're updating it, obviously.
And the trend is just like it's covering more parcels, more value. No, there's not a different trend or anything happening within current use.
No, there's a new category, and I would definitely defer to my colleagues at Forest Parks and Recreation for reserve forest land. It's having a very small impact, you know, at the moment, but that there might be a sort of an uptick in forest land because of that.
Because you don't have to have the management plan for that. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes, or your management plan said this is reserve forest,
Right.
then you shall, yeah, again,
Shall not.
definitely, yeah. So, right, so what we have a lot of happening is not, you know, there's only so many acres in Vermont.
Yeah. Well,
So
I wondered when do we,
sort of plateaus, but what we do have an increase in enrollment parcels because there are parcels that are sort of being broken up and shared or sold that can remain in the program, for example. So there's a lot of transfers, there's a lot of trusts or LLCs being established, and so the parcel might be moving into one of those. But yeah, there is a bit of a plateau for however many acres.
and is it fair to say that well, I guess total tax savings to rural landowners, part of that's municipal, so if we're just looking at the education fund, that'd be the 55 million. It's kind of what current use is costing the education fund.
Right, and this is as of, right, so this is reflecting 2024, so that would be a little bit.
And I wonder if you have more in years of higher property tax increases, if that causes more people to enroll. Like they start thinking about it again, like, oh, when they get their property tax bill, now like, oh, what was that one program that my name?
It's possible. I mean, it's, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for some folks, it's hard to stay enrolled, right? A lot of enrollment is, you know, if you're leasing to a qualified farmer, for example. Well, if the farmer is no longer able to farm and is not able to lease your property, well, now your property is not eligible. There's so many of those kind of arrangements to try to keep as much land in the program as possible, but.
Can you remind us what the penalty is when you take it out, or?
Right, so if it's developed or the lien needs to be removed, and there's lots of different ways that can happen, it has to be voluntarily remove the lien, right? If I buy a property that's enrolled and I don't want to be in this program anymore, there's something called the land use change tax. So that is basically this, there must be a.
Page 26.
Thank you. So, in, I think it's 2015, I think I'm still the Agency of Education when the legislature passed the change, but land use change tax is essentially a 10% penalty on the value of the property that's enrolled. And if it's a portion of the parcel, then the lister or assessor values that piece that's being removed as a standalone parcel, and the land use change tax is 10%.
10% of the value.
Yeah.
And yet, was that, when you, I don't know, in other words, said at 10%, was that trying to get at what they thought the tax benefit was?
I think to some extent, prior to that, it had been a 10% penalty on sort of prorated value. So that could really be helpful for some very high value parcels and maybe not for others. And then it was a 20% penalty if it had been in for less than 10 years. So they were sort of putting it in, taking it out, putting it in, taking it out. The idea was to sort of keep the parcel as perpetually whole. So that must have played some part as well. I think and we've bandied about over the years. Is there a different way to kind of automate that standalone parcel value? Can we still sort of get at the intent? And yes, some states definitely do based on benefits received.
But it's hard if you're subdividing it, because like how much do you get to that parcel? It could be a very valuable parcel or not.
Right.
But yeah, I could see us doing it, or why a state would want to do that. Just like you received $4 million in benefit over the last 20 years, you pay $4 million back. And if you pull it.
But when you subdivide a piece, so it would be more than likely as you subdivide a smaller piece, the value is much higher. And so the 10% is, if you break a building off or a 200 acre piece and you do 2 acres, it's
Right.
9.
Sure.
You on 22 have the parcel numbers, and the parcel numbers are growing. And somewhat with owners, and you have the total acres. But it would be really interesting because when you do get those smaller acres, a lot of larger plots of land, you've got 100 acres or 150 acres, and you break it up into 4 pieces, and then you have the house of 2 acres in a smaller piece in current use. And because the system works, its first acre is the most expensive, and then goes off. The bigger lot is appraised with a lot less value than it would be helpful to try to figure out what that road in more parcels is costing. Because if you figure that managing a piece of forest land, it's more advantageous to have 100 acres because the truck can come in and you can fill a log truck and you can do all of that. And we manage them. If it gets broken up into 3 33-acre pieces, it costs the program more, but is less, to manage it, it's less valuable because you probably can't fill a log truck in 33 acres. So it would, if there was a line that I could figure out about appraised value, it would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. So the land use change tax, does that also go to the ed fund or does that land?
Yes, so 50% of it, up to $2,000, goes to the town. Because the town is doing that value. So if it's a $10,000 land use change tax bill, the town keeps 2,000 of that. The rest is split 75-25 between the general fund and the education fund. And I might have that in here somewhere as to where those 2 pieces go. I should know at the top of it.
So the smaller portion is going to the ed fund?
I think the smaller portion is going to general.
Oh, okay.
I would think I think the majority would go there, but that's where the loss.
That's, yeah.
I'm surprised then he goes. Why would we get to do it?
Because you have the municipals. You have the municipal.
Oh, but the general fund paid when we paid the municipal the difference. They get to keep part of it, they get to keep
50% up to 2,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, another possible explanation for the general fund piece is that, the hold harmless payment. So there's a payment that goes from the general fund out to the municipalities to sort of hold their budget harmless for having current use enrollment so that the town isn't penalized by foregone municipal revenue.
Right.
And I think that's good.
Yes, that makes it is, yeah, that makes it. Okay.
It's not a lot of money, but the idea is that it is deterrent and it is a penalty and there's something, and I think it is growing. It has, ticked up over the years. On page 26, the land use change tax that's assessed. And granted, it can get assessed, but if you haven't actually developed the property, if you just want to be removed from the program, the land use change tax is determined, the amount is determined at the time that the parcel is removed, but it can sit there. That sort of liability can sit there until you either want to remove the lien or you've developed the parcel. So there is land use change tax that has been assessed on properties that hasn't been collected yet. But once they have to, then those become like an active liability. Just to add to the complexity of the program.
We've had that fight many times and we thought, in finance over that. We had a piece of land in Morristown that they subdivided the piece. They put in driveways, but they hadn't gone the final step. And the question was, when you go for the subdivision and you put a driveway in, have you not tipped your hand that you're not interested in being in the program anymore for the long term? And we weren't able to get it through. And but in my book, once you go for subdivision and you put a driveway in, you tipped your hand, you should be out.
Yeah,
And I realize this is appropriations committee, so maybe you're not, this is a little too in the weeds, but it also, the lien runs with the land and the land use change tax runs with the land. So if I sell you my property and there's a lien on it, hot potato, once you sign that liability is now the new owner's responsibility. So most of the time, obviously that would hopefully come up in title search or in, amicable negotiations. A lot of people might build that into their closing costs or something, but there are some every year that are like, whoa, I didn't know that I was gonna owe this land use change tax on this property.
if I want to take it
If
out.
I want to take it out or remove the lien.
Right.
Well, it's really not about the individuals that own the property anyways, because what you do is you sign up to manage your property in a certain way. And it's managing the forest land. So it really is about the land, not the individual.
But if the individual doesn't know when they buy it, especially an example of like, oh, look, it already has a driveway on it and it's subdivided, that they didn't actually pay the change, but that's
Well,
buyer beware. Yes, no.
Thing, which is something that, so we've talked about this in a prior year, but just to bring up one of the things that I have had, just so you all know, have had some interest in is the possibility of a category for current use that would be something akin to like floodplain management or riparian area, just as that these lands have a value in terms of staying open, and how do we recognize that and encourage people to keep that land open. I think like it is a tool, maybe not the tool that could accomplish that goal, but this feels like not the right year to do that. But just putting it out there is like, this is a thing I have been thinking about.
It would be similar to that the new forestry category.
but if you're doing on vehicles and we've done for years, riparian buffers, and you extend those buffers, that should be a legitimate use. I think.
Yes, well, and it also may, in terms of management plans, it just may have a different management structure.
Are these the property tax exemptions? Are they in the tax expenditure report?
It should be. Yes, those expenditures are in the tax expenditure.
Good to see those.
Do we know how many towns have voted to give veterans a tax exemption?
Above the 10,000.
Yeah.
I can find that really easily. I'm sorry, I don't know. I think it's quite a few.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's sort of we get a list every year from the veterans folks across the street of eligible veterans that are receiving that $10,000 exemption on the value of their property, and the towns can vote to expand that to up to 40,000 per person. I should be able to get that pretty quickly, I'm sorry. I think quite a few do.
Yeah, I would assume it's a lot.
And it's on the value of the property,
Yeah. So it's
So-
not the tax.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're- without a connection to the income. All right, any other questions? EBR? Like, yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, apologies for not having, we just found a couple little things and like four of the town numbers that we wanted to fix and just have this be fully baked.
No.
So that will be next week. And I do think you also get a TIF specific report from Betsy. And then, I'm sure, when we publish this, we publish all the supplemental data, a lot more deeper dive into things like the property tax credits. I'm sure someone from tax is happy to come in.
okay, great. Thanks for highlighting the report for us.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Now we can move to our TED Talks.
I will be probably talking for a lot longer than the 14 minutes or whatever they give you for a TED Talk. So unfortunately, bad news for you all.
Yes.
Oh, you're leaving.
We should always do. I mean, yeah. That
was pretty.
Everyone at Joint Fiscal Office, happy Friday afternoon. I'm gonna run through two reports and one issue brief. To start, we're gonna start with the pilot issue brief, considering there's a number of changes to the pilot special fund or revenues going in and out of the pilot special fund and the BAA and the 27 GovRec. And then we'll talk a bit about fee report and the tax expenditure report. So I provided the link in the slides to the pilot issue brief. This came out last year. And so
On our website.
it's on the website. Great. This is going to be a review of what's in the issue brief with some updated numbers and new figures that we've gotten since we published the report last year, or the issue brief. Very high level. This is probably a review for you all. Pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. The two programs are designed to compensate municipalities for property that is otherwise exempt, for state-owned property that is otherwise exempt from property taxes. You have the general pilot program, which compensates municipalities for the value of buildings within their municipal borders. And the A&R pilot program. This is going to focus primarily on the general pilot program. I know A&R pilot had a very high level how that operates, but we'll stick with general pilot for the most part. Last year, there was a change. Local option tax revenue, 30% of local option tax revenue used to go to the pilot special fund. However, in Act 57 in 2025, that was reduced to 25%. But that's also minus a nearly $6 per return fee administered by tax to make sure that money's going to the right municipality. Tax has if you want more details on how they do the actual administration of the thing, Rebecca Samaroff has a great presentation that talks about a lot of the challenges there, because these things don't line up with zip codes or other forms of administration. So at the 20,000, 30,000 foot level, the A&R pilot program compensates towns for the value of property that's purchased for various purposes, a lot of conservation land. 80% of the funding for that program comes from the general fund. There's a 20%, which is an interdepartmental transfer. And then, so in total between those two sources, the 27 GovRec includes a $2.7 million appropriation for A&R pilot in section P701.
Is that 20% from Department of Fish and Wildlife? Is that same fund that's underwater, so to speak, in that they're like trying to do the new stamps to go use for state parks?
I don't know exactly how they pull it. We could reach out to Andrea and Jason there, to get more context, and I imagine that some portion of it is their fee revenue.
Is it 20% of, from 20% is it always 80-20, or is it just based on like how much is fish and wildlife land and how much is other A&R land?
It's my understanding it's always the 2.7 million or whatever the appropriation is, it's 80% general fund and 20% from fish and wildlife through a transfer.
Right. And maybe they had at one point determined that 20% was fish and wildlife land.
Yes, I could see if there's someone
No, that's what
who's been around for longer than me may know the answer to that one. I'll make that.
So that there's like $540,000 that comes out of fish and wildlife for next year. Okay.
So even though I promised the very high level in our pilot, we're gonna get it out of the way and the basic mechanics. There are two different calculations for different property depending on when the land was required or when the land was acquired. So if acquired before April 1, 2016, there you take 0.6% of the fair market value of the land as of April 1, 2015, and multiply it by the land value. So that gives you the base payment. So all of these are getting to a base payment. If the land was acquired after April 1, 2016, they determine the base payment by using the land's fair market value and tax rate at the time of acquisition, which you'll see in the example down at the bottom. There is a process for updating these base payments. So the A&R pilot payment stays constant. These base payments are fixed unless there's an adjustment, as outlined in 32 VSA 3708. And so from time to time, A&R secretary will recommend an adjustment. The last adjustment occurred in 2022, so I think you all are pretty due to seeing an adjustment in that amount. Yeah, so I do understand that that's you'll probably see it next year.
And our pigments are low.
They are, yeah, and seeing that the last adjustment was 1.29%.
Low compared to their value. No,
If you have a ski area on state land, they appraise it as if the ski area doesn't exist.
it's the land.
So I picked this particular example of how the A&R pilot calculation will work because I feel I love this state park. It's down in Hubbardton. The Taconic Mountains Ramble State Park has a nice Japanese garden. Highly recommend. But it was bequeathed to the state in 2016. So it's an example of this second type of base payment calculation. So you have the land value, which is it's at $232,000 divided by 100, and then multiply by the tax rate in Hubbardton at the time it was acquired in 2016, and that was 85 cents. And so they received nearly a $2,000 payment. Hubbardton does for the state park.
How big is the state park?
It's pretty small. I don't know the amount of acreage, but I don't think it's more than 100.
Well, 1900 is not very much money for 100 acres.
I lived there in the 92. I lived in Hubbardton. And I've been in Hubbardton Battlefield. which is
Lived in the
Yeah.
state park.
It's not a good place.
That's a good place to fly a kite.
I thought you were saying you lived in the state park.
No, Hubbard.
Okay.
Goes from Mount Independence over to Hubbardton.
Moving on to an area I'm much more familiar with, general pilot payments. So there are payments for the value of government buildings. They're made each year as a part of the annual appropriations bill. The general pilot payments, let's see, in fiscal year 26, Act 27 appropriated 12.2 million. It's the same amount in the GovRec for 27. This general pilot payment includes the $750,000 statutory cap for UPN buildings. And then it also includes 2 correctional payments. One is $40,000, and then Newport and Springfield have a $152,000 payment for correctional facilities that they host. And generally, I know there's a very different conversation going on around pilot given the surplus that's in the fund, but it's relatively recent history that they were fully funded. The first year pilot payments for 2 towns were fully funded was in 2024. Previously, they had been prorated by some percent.
Ever
Based on
since,
the-
ever since it started.
As far as I understand, I went pretty far back, and as far as I understand it, they've always been prorated.
And that was just an appropriation decision saying like, we don't have to let them.
There weren't enough revenues, and a lot of the time, they were, I would say, a little conservative on the appropriation amount, making sure that they weren't overbooking revenues. Yeah.
How much is the surplus? Are you
You're
gonna
gonna get that.
I'm gonna get into that a little bit. It is, at the close of, 25, it was only touch over 15 million.
In the annual appropriation this year or something. For never.
Well, 22, the overall appropriation is 12.2 million.
And the money going into the fund. Or you got a slide on.
I have I'm gonna go into the revenue expenses, in recent times trajectory.
That's probably all we really have.
Yeah, this.
That's good to think.
Fair enough. I will kind of gloss over the calculation.
Yeah.
We don't need to get in the weeds of the
We're not
calculation.
gonna
If you don't
do it.
want to, I'll spare you all the math. It's Friday afternoon. I do find it's interesting. Sometimes you find some really fun stuff in the state building inventory. On the tax website, they publish their spreadsheets, which go through the pilot calculation for each town. There's a tab that has every state-owned building on it, and you can go through and see how much it's valued. And sometimes there's fun nuggets. So I included 3. One is at 115 State Street, the building we're sitting in, valued at over $34 million. Through
I
quarter,
really think they could rebuild this building for 30. I don't think they could.
That's a question for AOA's contractor who provides these insurance replacement values. The sky ship, so it's implying that the state house is, valued 3 times more of the sky ship gondola, which is part of the Killington ski area. Through quirks of ski leases, the state ends up owning.
We own the building.
We own the lift. Yeah.
Really?
So there's certain.
Do we get the revenue from the lift?
There is. I don't.
I know there are negotiated agreements for this
Yes.
area, but if we own it, we should get more.
I will. I don't remember off the top of my head how the different.
We don't get more money, we're slow the lift down.
We get free rides.
But it is often based. The leases are based on a percentage of lift ticket revenues.
Yeah.
And if there are buildings that are selling concessions or whatnot in state-owned land, then we get the revenue from that as well. Broadly speaking,
Right.
yes.
And no connection between that and the pilot bidding for the land.
The ski leases would be independent, but there are towns are receiving, the point here is that Killington is receiving a pilot payment for the skyship gondola. That
That is
is
not on state
Yeah.
land
not,
or US force.
it might be US Forest Land, yeah, I don't know for sure.
So,
We should get the pilot money.
so there's an A&R pilot, which is the land and on,
Mhm.
and then you're saying the lift pays into this pilot. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And separate from that,
the lift.
it's the 10% on the lift tickets.
No,
Well, we pay the pilot, the Killington for the value of that,
Mhm.
right, they should be paying us.
Right.
but not all the property.
Yeah, it depends on whether it's state land, federal land, kind of how the lease is structured. Whole set
It's a
of
lot of-
speed leases are a whole
Yeah,
separate
we won't get in.
area that you can really dive into. Or ski
Like how
down.
much was the Bennington money? Did they get paid for the Bennington money?
I'll look at the inventory and tell you.
So the Ethan Allen money.
Yes, this is I think this is in the Burlington,
Yeah,
the Green Mountains in Burlington.
Yeah.
Yep, so I thought just interesting. But yeah, I can look up the pension monument, see how much it's valued.
Yeah, well, they say it's falling down, so maybe the value's gone down. Or it's long waterlogged at least. Center Watson.
Well, just on the Ethan Allen Monument, so we're paying City of Burlington something for just for the cemetery or for the Ethan Allen Monument in the cemetery?
For the monument that's in the cemetery, because I don't think the cemetery, well, it wouldn't be the land anyway. It would be, right, the monument is considered a state.
Oh, I
monument.
see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that every year or just?
This is every year, and these are, I will note, right, these are the values of, so $774,000 that converts into a pilot payment.
Right, as the input into the formula.
Yep.
It's interesting that counts
Right. Is that monument counts as a bill?
as a building.
Yes.
But
The
or
state
as a structure that we.
I will say, I was cruising through the state-owned building inventory, and I thought it was interesting, and I included it here. I didn't go fully down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Curious.
Yes, so one fun quirk about pilot payment calculations is that the CLA is used to multiply, which is unlike how it works for education property taxes, right? In which you're essentially using the CLA, you're dividing it to bring locally assessed values up to a common statewide value. Here, I think because the math is the opposite, we're using a statewide. This is the intuition as I understand it. There might have been another reason of why it was structured this way, but you're taking a common state value through insurance replacement and converting it to its local value. And so it's working in the opposite direction. So I'm going to skip over some calculations. If you want to review them at your own leisure, this is how they work.
Okay. You don't need
One of I do, when I talk about pilot, often get asked about why we use insurance replacement values as opposed to locally assessed values. The key thing is that there is some administrative ease to this. It could be a bit of a nightmare to have individual municipalities providing and updating and maintaining the list of state-owned buildings and their property and having them assess it and send it up to the state, and the state has to do the payments. There is also some of, I'm glad Joe Remick mentioned methane adjusters, because I have the exact same examples in this presentation. But there are, some of these are relatively complex valuation tests that the state owns. And so by AOA would likely have to maintain these values for insurance replacement as a part of their work anyway. And so it makes the program easier to administer. But it is a consideration and something we talk about quite a bit of why we use insurance replacement in the programs. Since pilot payments are being multiplied by CLAs, what part of the recent trend in the overall pilot payments and in the overall appropriation, why it's level between fiscal year 26 and 27, is that the decrease in CLAs are mitigating the impact or increases in local pilot payments. So Johnson is an example here. Even though the amount of the overall value of state-owned property in the borders of Johnson increased by, it looks like, a little more than $1.5 million, because their CLA drops so substantially between fiscal years 24 and 26, their overall payment decreased over that span. In addition, I wanted to talk a little bit about, there isn't obviously a perfect relationship between the towns or municipalities that are generating local option tax revenue and the municipalities that are receiving payments. So I took a snippet of the Department of Tax's local option tax finder. And so you can see at a glance who has which type of local option tax, and then compare that to the set of municipalities that are receiving pilot payments. There are more municipalities that are receiving pilot payments than are those who are generating revenue. A lot of, and so there's a wider set of municipalities that you'll see a lot of lean-tos and kind of smaller park structures that are generating these payments. And do want to note that the vast majority of payments that go out are for relatively small amounts, but understandably Randolph because of DTC, Montpelier, Linden, right? These are the places that are receiving large amounts of pilot payments. And then kind of outside of these large concentrations of state activity, you see a lot of smaller pilot payments in across the state.
Okay.
And then here's the slide you were looking for, the money slide. Over time, between fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 21, revenue and expenses were pretty well matched for those pilot special funds. This really speaks to the constraint on revenues.
And expenses are payments,
Our payments.
not like administrative.
Yes, exactly. And so the ending balance stayed relatively steady between fiscal year 17 and 22. Where revenues really started to speed above expenses, there's two reasons behind that. First of all, on the slide I provided the number of municipalities that have local option tax on meals and rooms or sales and use, and those have increased pretty substantially over that time. Almost a doubling of the municipalities that have a meals and rooms tax, quite a few substantial increase in the number of municipalities that have sales and use tax, local option tax. Yeah, so that's a big driver.
You know what the second town was that doing an SUT on jet fuel?
I emailed Chris and Logan about that, so I'm glad we figured out. It's probably Berlin just did a local option tax, and Nap airport sells jet.
Because that came up and
Yep.
somebody said they didn't think that airport had jets, but they honestly didn't.
That's the best. That's what we came up with. Yeah, pretty sure it's Berlin.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, SUT, what is that?
Sales and use tax.
So then,
Yeah. And then the other piece is that in the wake of the pandemic, the other reason for the increase in revenues is consumption taxes had a strong rebound from the pandemic. Sales and use. A lot of folks during the pandemic were at home. They were also receiving stimulus checks from the government. And so they were at their house, they were looking at their furniture and saying, maybe I need an upgrade here. And so there was more spending on goods as opposed to services. So there was a substantial increase in sales and use during and post-pandemic. And then we also benefited, I think, a bit from having a stable kind of COVID management. And so, and when folks were limited to more domestic travel after meals and rooms tax really took a hit, understandably, during the pandemic, but they rebounded quite quickly during the pandemic. So strong consumption taxes post-pandemic and increase in the number of municipalities with a local option tax means that there's much more revenue available to the pilot special fund. And then once payments were funded at 100%, there's no further room for them to grow. So revenues increased quite a bit. Once you hit fiscal year 24, you can see that the expenses level off. And so we have a substantial.
so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So it's the increase in revenues that we see there, is that because more towns were adopting local options type taxes?
I would say that's the primary
Okay.
driver. Strong consumption tax revenue plays a part. You can't rely on that going forward. So as there are various proposals on how to maybe address that fund balance, right? A consideration here is that local option taxes do rely on consumption patterns in the economy. And I don't know, that I'm not the legislative economist, but
And when a town does this, sales and use, can they do it on only certain things, so they'd have to just do it on the, whatever the state is doing.
That's
For administrative.
Yeah.
purposes, Sure. And the tax takes some money, right, or is that?
They do, they have a $5.96 per return fee. So when a retailer submits their sales and use tax form either monthly or quarterly, $5.96, that's for tax to administer and making sure that revenue is going into the right place. In this table, shows, all the pilot, appropriations from the pilot special fund in Act 27 of 2025. In it, whoa. In addition to this list, yeah, so in total, in Act 27, $14.5 million were appropriated from the pilot special fund. The GovRec BAA would add a $500,000 appropriation to the Division of Property Evaluation and Review to help maintain and develop the statewide inventory communications property. I know Andrew Stein was in this room to talk with you all about what that might mean in the progress on that front. And then, yeah, so generally speaking, these appropriations, right, support municipalities in various different ways. And so even though the list is beyond general pilot payments, yeah, they all have municipal use. And then looking at the 27 GovRec, the $12.2 million for the general pilot payments that was in fiscal year 26, it's carried forward into 27. As I mentioned, that's a lot, able to maintain the same value because there's not upward pressure in the payments because we have the CLAs involved and that's decreasing. Yeah, it's safe to have that amount of $12.2 million. The same way the payments to correctional facilities is the same as last year. There are, however, two changes in the GovRec. First of all, there's a piece that would change. There's $100,000 that's normally paid for by the education fund that supports the education of assessment professionals. So the GovRec suggested changing that funding source from the education fund to the pilot special fund. And then, as you discussed with Joe Remick, the proposal to take the per parcel fees, the $8.50 and $1, and change that funding source from the general fund to the pilot special fund. And the estimate on that is $3.4 million per year. And that's the number of parcels times $9.50. Yeah, I did some back of the envelope math and got it the same place.
Okay.
We won't know how much revenue go to the pilot special fund. We're kind of waiting until March and municipalities. We could certainly do the math on where we're looking at now with the towns that currently have local option taxes, but yeah, still waiting to see who's going to vote and put it on town ballots in March. Because whereas before it was more constrained, towns don't need to go through you all to do a charter change and do a lot. And so, yes, we're seeing more towns considering the local option tax.
Yeah.
So that's it on the pilot special fund.
Yeah.
Water. Look at my time. Okay. So the other piece that I work on, talk through annual fee reports. They do come to you all, and there is a relatively new process. We're in the third year of it, that has JFO more involved in looking at the submissions from agencies, departments. So talk through what the old process was, what's the new process is like, how you can work with myself or Amy to get to see fee reports in more detail. But yeah, I'll kind of go over that general sense. Maybe this is the most like TED talky slide that I have in this whole presentation, which is like, why do we even have fees? Getting more philosophical here. Right. So fees are generally, we're thinking about them as supporting specific services for specific users. There's the connection between user and service, right? For DMV fees, they go into the transportation fund because you're paying DMV fees to use the roads, right? Like that's kind of the linkage there. Hunting license fees, hunters are paying those to support game wardens and conservation work and a whole host of things that Fish and Wildlife are doing. But sometimes, right, you have a split between there are some activities that feel like they provide a public good and they support specific users who are paying into it. So the example I used here is the Land Use Review Board, right? Their funding sources both pay for through permitting fees, but they also receive general fund, recognizing kind of that dual. We all benefit as a state for, you know, for administering the Act 250 permit process.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just were talking this morning about boat registration fees that go to the DMV and not to the, supporting the fishing access. For
Exactly.
example.
Yeah.
Curious.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not going down, but just
Right.
it was interesting.
Like, but the DMV does for registrations.
Right. Yeah.
You're gonna pull those boats on the road to get to the lakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is very good, super philosophical, right?
Yeah.
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 Although they don't call boats, they call vessels.
It's technical.
So the old, I'm calling this the old system. This is current the system that's outlined in statute. And so in 32 VSA 605, there's this fee report that is developed by the executive branch. And they basically had different areas of government set up on a 3-year rotation. And so in 2021, you would have a group of folks present their fee report, and then the next year would be human services and natural
Was
resources.
it in 2011 that 605?
That's when it started the rotation. Yep. And then, yeah, the third piece is the wide universe of protection to persons and property. And so this fee report was usually used as the basis of a consolidated fee bill where Ways and Means in particular would be spending a lot of time with folks who had submitted their fee report to understand what fees they were looking to increase or change or modify. There would be an annual fee bill. The last major one that I saw was during 2019, not to say that there haven't been changes to fees along the way and since then, but that was the last time there was a real large fee bill that hit multiple different agencies and departments.
There hasn't been compliance with 32 VSA 605. That's what people say, but I don't know if that's true.
I'm not, this is more that like a
I don't want to get you in trouble. But
Yes, yeah. But one thing, right, is so there could be a request to not change fees. Yeah, but I don't, that's all I will say about that situation.
Because I thought the fee report wasn't whether they wanted to change it or not, but like here was the cost and here was the revenue.
So the language does specify submitting fee report and request. So if I understand it right, that the
Has the fee report been issued? Can you tell me that?
So the fee reports were issued kind of going along, and what we'll move into
2019 to today, they have during that time frame, did they still do the reports?
still do the reports, but haven't included a request yet. Yep. So recent big bills, this was, so the process started it would have been fiscal year 24. There's a new fee report process that's included in session law. And it took what was in 32 VSA, what is in 32 VSA 605, and included a few extra pieces of information. So Whereas fee reports only included information on revenues. The fee reports now have information on the number of fee payments, so we're seeing numbers of units, which greatly help our ability to understand more what's happening in terms of kind of like transactions for specific fees. The session law language also requires calculation of inflation adjustments, and this means so a fee was last adjusted in, let's say, 2017. What has been the amount of inflation over that time? What would the fee be if it had increased along with that inflation rate over time? And then this has also been super helpful for me in looking at reports, is that agencies and departments have a wealth of knowledge about how their fees compare to what's going on in other states. Some of the market considerations. So thinking about, I often go for the Secretary of State's office, right, when they're considering nursing fees, right, they're mindful of the state's need for nurses and other adjustments, right? So the fee reports included requirements that folks provide information about fees in comparable jurisdictions. A lot of times it's our neighboring states. And also just any specific context or information they thought was relevant to the specific fee. So those reports are developed in consultation with JFO. It's usually me. I try and rope in other folks to join in the fund. And so they submit a draft report. And so we go in and spot check the data and look in and see, make sure that everything was submitted according to the guidelines. And then folks submit final report on December 15th, and they're all in the General Assembly reports page. I will talk a little bit about what they look like there. But this was the third year of this new process. We basically took the rotation from 2011, and when we started it, we tried to figure out who would have been up, kind of continued in that cycle. And so in the third year, we started at the beginning.
Yes, maybe this is in this area here, but we had testimony, yes, I think it was from DPS, Department of Public Safety, in reference to Jeff Wall's VCIC. It appears as they're losing or they're subsidizing this program for Vermont record checks.
The background checks?
Yes, who would be responsible for the fees that are possibly raising those fees? Not to make money, but not to, so we're not to subsidize the program.
That's certainly a consideration for you all. I know they're $30. Michelle Childs helped me find this out. They haven't been changed since 2007. And I think that was effective in 2009. There's a little bit of a later effective date. So it's been 15 years about since those fees have been adjusted. But yes, that could be a consideration. I know they've seen, from what I understand, there are fewer folks who are getting background checks more recently. And so I think it was in a couple years ago, they're receiving about $3 million, and now it's down to about $2.5 million. And so, yes, there is
So if we do this, or who does that?
the General Assembly can adjust that fee.
Usually,
Yeah.
finance would do all
Jane
fees.
says she doesn't.
No, GovOps does the fee
No,
bill.
They do the fee bill, but
They do
any
the
kind
fee
of
bill.
tax or fee has to go
Yeah,
to finance.
has to go to finance, right?
Yeah, she said it has to go to judiciary. I'm just trying to find out where it
The
goes.
fee bill goes, she said it had to go to judiciary.
It's a judicial thing, judiciary.
Well, I guess they want your view on it, but I think by rule, it's.
Wouldn't it would come, the original request would come from the administration.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're not making them up enough, so they would put it into, they could put it in a big fee bill, or they could put it into a small
Right.
legislative.
But so like a few years ago,
Yeah.
when we raised the DMV fees, the governor didn't propose to raise the DMV fees, so it was clear to the legislature that the DMV's fees needed to be raised. People at DMV quietly off the record said that you should probably raise them, but the governor opposed it, but he signed a bill. So we did that in transportation without a fee bill. So I think it could probably happen anywhere, but if judiciary did it, it would have to go to finance to get their approval.
I'm just looking for a starting point though.
Yeah, but we could do it if you wanted to in year, but we would work with others.
Just so, you know, if they're doing, and we asked for the list of what the background checks they were doing. If they're doing the background checks for people that are delivering Meals on Wheels meals and people that
Yeah.
are volunteering their time to do medical transports and things like that, I'm not inclined to, be sympathetic to,
We ended up paying it ourselves through.
because it will come back around, and I certainly don't want anybody volunteering their time to deliver meals for Meals on Wheels as an individual paying for them.
But they were gonna provide us a list of.
Yeah, need to provide us a list, because I'm afraid that I'm very sympathetic to somebody that's volunteering their time to deliver meals through Meals on Wheels or, driving
Yeah.
for medical transports.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and this discussion goes back to where I had on the slide earlier, philosophically about a fee, right? Whether background check should be something that's understanding that it doesn't raise enough revenue to cover the full cost of that system, and whether it's general fund or whether it's a fee. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So to the usage of these fee reports,
So why, like, on the Fish and Wildlife fee, I'm on your how to use fee reports.
Yep.
I'm missing. So is it just the Commissioner Fish and Wildlife, or all commissioners, all agencies that have fees have this ability?
not all, it depends. It really depends on specific areas. For the commissioner can adjust fish and wildlife fees, but I would say that the ability to adjust fees through rule is relatively. There are fewer fees that can be adjusted through rule than through your all's purview.
There are some.
Yeah. So yes, these reports have been submitted to the General Assembly reports page. One unfortunate limitation of that page is that they have to be submitted on PDF. And since we asked for much more information, the number of columns that had to fit on a PDF, either the reports, which like this is not enough on folks submitting the reports, is the frustration that like I also feel, is that the reports are either you see them, they're microscopic by the time you get all the columns that fit on one page, or the columns spill across multiple pages and they're just not the most user friendly. I like totally understand. And if we were to continue this process again next year, I would spend some time thinking about how to make it easier and more accessible for y'all. So that said,
it'd be both in Excel and in PDF.
so we have the Excel versions.
Yeah, but you send you.
They do send us those. And so I think for the way I've been talking to folks about it, if you have questions about a specific, if you want to see transportation submission, I'm happy to provide that to you. But since there's no way to get it out
Right.
to the General Assembly through the reports page,
Right.
we're hoping, yeah, we have access to those. Feel free to reach out to me about a specific line item or a whole agency or department. We're happy to provide you with that information. Elle has all those links to the GA submissions. So if there are ones that actually work on PDF, we can provide those to you, but yes.
Okay.
That is the status of those, and I'm thinking about how to make that more accessible. I did want to note that although this fee report process is happening, because it is working through consultation with JFO, what that now means is the budget is including, so in the governor's recommend, there's a proposal to remove farmer operating fees for large feeding operations, medium feeding operations. So those are, they support water quality work at the Agency of Agriculture, replaced by general fund. It's about $230,000, I think, of general fund. It's part of the GovRec, but that's submitted as part of the budget. And it doesn't show up on our fee reports because we're just getting information about the fees. So that request piece that was in 605 is happening separately. And so flagging two of the things that I've seen thus far that are fee associated that will come across or not, but will be talked about in the building. Yes, there's also the Fish and Wildlife fee, conservation fee proposal. But that is something the commissioner can do through rule. And
So they say.
so they say. And so yes, one thing to be mindful of is whether Department of Fish and Wildlife has included those revenues in their budget request, and when they come in to talk with y'all, flagging that as a piece to determine. So those are few reports. Does anyone have any questions on few reports?
And the commissioner, if you want to create a new fee by rule. Just change.
I mean, this would be a new fee. The way they phrase it in their presentation is that they have the ability, but they may need to consult with you all on a specific. I will follow up on what specifically it looked like for new fees, but they referenced it in their presentation. They did a presentation in Ways and Means a week ago, 10 days ago, some version of that. And so I can, there's one slide that referenced, the authority piece.
Tax expenditure.
Tax expenditure report, I understand I have 10 minutes. Primarily, I will talk broad level about the tax expenditure report. One of the things I did in these slides is the tax expenditure report goes through line by line, every single tax expenditure that's on the books. It's 86 pages. So what I did is I snipped, we have summary tables for each of the each tax type, and the tax expenditure in that tax type, and I've pasted them throughout the presentation. So if you want to get a high level overview of all the tax expenditures, see recent history and the actual or estimated costs in those expenditures, and then what the forecast for fiscal year 26 is. They're scattered through the latter half of this presentation.
Budget 22, 23, and then 26, because not all of them are done every year.
It is because we are doing the tax expenditure report. So this would have been in the summer of 2024. And so the last full, you have to go back.
Just do
There's
it
a bit of a like data
Because you do it every 2
issue. We do it every 2 years. We don't do it every year. And so looking forward, but when we submit it in January of 25, the next year, thinking forward to fiscal year.
Does the report list any other information about tax expenditures, like if they expire or anything from they were created, or is it just here's the lost revenue?
It has, so they have the summary tables, and then they also have the statutory purpose, what's included in statute for why that expenditure is on the books. And then some information, if there is salient information about their history or whatever, but they're usually pretty short. They're not comprehensive. Up until 2023, each tax expenditure report came with review reports. And so these were deeper dives into like the earned income tax credit, kind of these larger, the downtown and village tax credit process, the sales tax expenditure on residential heating fuels. And so these were deeper dives. They expired in 2023. And at that point, a lot of the major ones have been cycled through. But if you're looking for more information about kind of the larger ones, that information can be found in the reviews report. But if you're interested in one, I'll try.
I just wondered if there was a sunset on it, that would be listed, or just may or may not, but it sounds like there's.
It may or may not be. When I went through and kind of looked at each one, if it looked like it was going to expire in the near future, or I could see some evidence of that, I would include the information, but I can't promise that happened for all 40 some odd sales tax expenditures.
Right.
Yes. So this is interesting on this slide. I'm going to breeze through a lot of the information, but since we're close out of time, right, the reason why the tax expenditure report comes to you all is that fiscally speaking, tax expenditures have the same effect as direct appropriations because you're not receiving that money. It's foregone revenue. You don't have it to spend it. You don't have the ability to spend it. And I do want to note there are certain things that are not considered tax expenditures. So one big example is the current use program. It's not included in the tax expenditure report because of the second bullet. It's outside the normal structure of the education property tax. You're still assessing property taxes on that land. You just made a decision by creating a current use program that that land should be valued differently. So it's not an expenditure, and so it's not included in the report. There are other ones, that are not included outside of the taxing power of the state. This would be if it was preempted federally, generally speaking. So it's not everything.
Can you explain that third bullet point? Revenue foregone is unduly burdensome.
It would be, we wouldn't consider maybe, let's say there was a specific tax that may have some compliance issues, for example, you wouldn't consider the revenue that you lost because you weren't able to fully administer the tax. You wouldn't try and estimate that revenue that you've lost because there wasn't full compliance. It's like it's yes. Yeah, unduly burdensome to administer. So the report goes over 7 areas of tax expenditures in the big. So between individual income, sales and use, and property tax, there's nearly $900 million in tax expenditure. Personal income tax. This slide includes at a very high level, this is the full list from the report. The big ones are your standard deduction and personal exemption. The EITC, child tax credit, and capital gains exclusion. Those are all the ones that are above $10 million. Sales tax expenditure. The larger ones are energy purchases for residencies. So that's $55 million of foregone revenue. Sales of food is the big one within the sales tax. Expenditure estimated for fiscal year 26.
Clothing, footwear, it's like there's a lot of detail about what, right?
This is, so the exemption mentions food purchased for off-site consumption. And so
I said clothing and footwear.
oh, clothing and footwear, I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's another one. Right.
It's not all clothing and all.
No, it's yes, in the same way. Sorry, I misheard. The like depending on the type of belt.
Yeah.
Is either in or out. And we have in our 101s some slides about kind of the vagaries of what constitutes exempt clothing versus not. Yeah, tax administrators really get excited about
Right.
that.
And there's some of that around foods too. Candy, for example.
Candy
Which we should be charging for that. But we don't because it's food.
And because of money.
And you shouldn't, maybe that, maybe I should introduce it. Introduce that business.
Sugary.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do know, right, in a grocery store, if the piece of food is sold with like plastic silverware, that makes the difference of whether it's exempt versus not. Because with plastic silverware, it could be on-site consumption. But yes, it gets in the weeds in a hurry. And
And
so
so that's the sales tax or when does it become a meat?
So
Meals and rent?
right, so then, yeah, you don't want to tax things that are for on-site consumption, because then you'd be double taxing, you'd have things that should be applied to the business.
So they still get taxed, they just get a meals tax, 11% tax instead of 6%.
We go back to the previous, so the red box there, the energy purchases for residences, this is fuel, basically not collecting sale tax on fuels for residences. Is that accurate?
Yes, for residences, and that includes electricity, so there's
And
the thermal piece
Yeah,
and.
okay, and so it doesn't, it would otherwise be on fuel, oil, propane, electricity. I might just go across the hall and talk about that really. So I just want to make sure that I was like referencing the correct number. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I will, you will see on your charge point receipt that charging a car at the charging station has the 6% sales and use tax as a line item on there. So yeah, it does apply in a more commercial setting. But yeah. So again, provided a summary list of sales tax expenditures. There are quite a few of them. The most recent is the sales tax expenditure or sales tax exemption for national products. A couple minutes. So property tax expenditures, 150 we estimated, and so these estimates were done by the Department of Taxes. It's a joint, I should mention that the tax expenditure report is really a joint effort between JFO and the Department of Taxes. So the estimate for fiscal year 26, the property tax expenditures was $115.5 million.
Is this the buy down?
This would not be the buy down. So this is the total list of all of these expenditures that are in statute. Largest one is public, pious, and charitable property.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've listed them out. You can review at your own time. And then the rest of the presentation is
Can you go back? What is 5011? Actually, that doesn't narrow it down. What is PPC pious?
so that is the PPC stands for public, pious, and charitable property, and it's just of that overall exemption. So for 5011, the first line, public, pious, and charitable property, that's the total
That's the name of the category.
of the category,
Okay.
and then
I know what it is.
charitable is the breakdown. Yeah,
I had just never heard it called pious.
yeah, it's an old, yes, it feels like an older term. Yeah, for
Like,
religious buildings. Yeah,
like Cleveland. Like another archaic. Put like money going to churches.
okay, yeah.
And it's a growing.
I know why like Vermont State College is not just part of the pilot program. Why are they in the tax expenditure?
So they are exempted, so colleges, the property is exempted, and because they're exempted, that's why we make the pilot payment.
Right. Isn't it? So I guess if you list all the state lands, the tax exemption reports that are exempt from paying tax.
Yeah, these would be all the, yeah, all kind of college property.
Like, what about all the,
So the A&R,
like they don't pay property tax?
they don't, but that would be under public, but I don't see that as a separate line. I can figure out where.
Part of the public, private, and charitable, that's 72 million includes all the state land.
I don't want to say anything that I'm unsure about, so I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Make sure, yeah, property tax is not my, normal.
And then we, with the fraternities and sororities, that was pretty recent, I think, that we.
Repealed it.
Yeah, there were some fraternities at the institution where the pro tem works, where they.
Yeah.
People decided they didn't need a tax exemption.
But the sky should go.
Yeah, but that's.
What about it?
You were here for that.
So that's why that's 5019, the ski lifts and snowmaking equipment. We have just exempted that to support the ski area industry. We're not gonna charge property tax on that.
Yeah, and part of that matches, so, right, depending on the lease, that makes a difference in whether the state owns that equipment, so like lift equipment, and so there would also be an equity issue, right? So for the folks who they own their equipment, you would exempt it, and then there would be equity across the ski industry.
Senator Love, there's
Property
the
tax treatment.
10,000 preventions down there. We don't, not the number of towns, but the dollar amount, 650.
Okay.
Pretty small. Okay.
Yes, and then the rest I snipped in, the other sections of, tax expenditures. The big one you'll see, and this is, Pat Timshin, my colleague at JFO, has been looking into this research and development tax credit because of the changes in HR1. Has some, impact on the state, but I'm not gonna say anything further because that's as far as I know. Meals and rooms tax has, expenditures.
So there's a
for-
federal research and development.
Yeah,
We're
yeah, there's that.
piggybacking. Or like it's related to the federal tax. credit?
It's related, but I don't know how similar it is.
Okay. And maybe that's what like HR1 changed that, so. it might
And
change.
we're tied to it in some capacity, so it has a revenue impact to us. Yes, there are meals and rooms, exemptions, right, for meals served in hospitals or convalescent or nursing homes, meals served at summer camps,
Why would well, I guess, so this suppressed data fewer than 10 claimants, like, we're gonna figure out who approved their facades of their building and find out that they got a tax, like, wouldn't we want to know? Why are we suppressing that data?
So some of these the data aren't available. So when they're not, there's a line for, data unavailable. A lot of these are, very hard for us to get, for example, at
Well, it
the,
says suppressed data fewer than 10 claimants for the ASHTO. It just seems like if they're getting a public tax credit, like,
sorry, this is on the next slide. It is a Department of Taxes, any, tax information that's, provided for fewer than 10 claimants is suppressed. And this is kind of across the Department of
Right.
Taxes, yeah.
I know they do that for payment, like what the tax paid, but this seems like a grant to the business, and when we give grants, it's all public information. Like I ran a grant program for the state, and I couldn't say, oh, we gave less than 10 entities grants, so we're not gonna tell you who it is. But that's just my personal, not, I know you sign for it. Okay.
So I think that's all I have for you. The rest of these slides were more informational, in terms of just having kind of the information in roughly the same place. Yes, I did. I know Chris, when he was looking at these slides, channeled specifying the diesel fuel as a exemption, right? This is our dyed diesel. So if you're putting diesel in a tractor for off-road use, that shows up here. So you're more than welcome to spend time looking at these tax expenditures if you have some free time, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me if you have questions about any of the line items, and I will learn about them, or Pat is the other person at JFO who spent a lot of time on this report. And Logan helped us out with the transportation pieces. So and their powers of mind.
Student housing, unless it's a sorority or fraternity, seeing them.
That would be, yes, the teams, the two
Sororities and fraternities are exempt.
Yes, but student housing is exempt, but then it looks like, or before we saw that it was repealed, so it's not all student housing. But I guess they're more than housing. It just said it's not estimated, I guess, because it's all university.
I went down for some of these a bit of a rabbit hole. Yeah, and the data are just really hard to get to. And I think I will spend some time this summer when we go through it again, is really being clear when things are not estimated through data challenges, because I noticed it specifies in a few places that the data are available, but there might be that some data are available, but it's hard to get a specific number at it. So
we look at the full report, like if I wanted to know what the student housing exemption was, it gives me a citation in the full report.
correct. So you would,
Sentence in there.
yes, for the report tutorial piece, this is a good question. So these item numbers are really going to be for each specific one. So if you're in the presentation, you say, yes, for student housing, I'm interested in the specific line item. If you search Control F for item number 4.101, there is a piece in the report that will give you the statutory citation, when it went on the books, statutory purpose, in a little kind of 2 or 3 sentence summary of the exemption, and any kind of places where you're asking questions about sororities and fraternities versus student housing that might be discussed.
That was a mash. Well, revoking.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And some sort
But
of.
fraternal societies
Some of
are
them,
reducing.
they own.
They get, that's insurance premium tax.
Insurance premium taxes.
I do not, that is not my area of expertise.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know that they're getting a tax. You pay a tax on your insurance premium?
Yes.
Do I pay a tax on my insurance premium?
Great. I do not know much about
Thank you,
insurance premium
Ted.
tax. Yes, of course. So I would look into that before getting too far in the weeds.
We're already there.
Before getting too far in front of my skis, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, but this is, we can look at the whole 80 some page report,
Yes, and if you have any questions, you can.
which is here. Nice.
Oh,
We print out.
I printed out.
all right. Very nice.
Forgot I had already printed out. Good bedtime reading.
It is. It is an effort to get the information out there. That's what I will say. Yep.
Now, when you're looking for revenue, it's good to look at this and like, why are we getting $2 million tax expenditure for this?
Yeah.
But then when you try to change it, you find out there's
You
50 people that
take them
really
out of the
care.
woodwork.
Okay, any other questions for Ted? Requests for future TED Talks?
I like the TED Talk format.
Yeah.
You need a,
Yeah,
I talked about, we don't have the budget in the JFO for the fancy ones, so like making one out of cardboard. I don't think Catherine would go for like a $200 microphone or whatever. But, yeah.
You can make a giant red spot carpet.
yeah.
I did joke about like,
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, scanning up